Everybody, welcome to Snow Talk. Way Through News meteorologist Brian Good here on this Wednesday. Update on the stats there. Still holding steady, of course, at 14.4 and 9.5 normal to date, and then 13.3 last year to date. So we're looking good so far. It is above normal snowfall for the winter season, and that is not going to change. Still keeping the 23rd to the 25th on the board for next week. I've seen some discussion and chatter that there is nothing to see here. That is not true. There is something to see there for that period, and I'll explain why in a second. Some people take models verbatim. You can't do that. You look at the pattern and go from there, and I'll explain on that here in a second. First off, let's cover the short term. We do have a lot of clouds to talk about. We've had some drizzle around the area. Look at that, Bedford and Seymour seeing some blue sky, you lucky dogs. But whether or not that gets into here probably wouldn't happen into Louisville until the very last minute of the day. Now, clearing sky tonight you would think would be a good thing, but that's not exactly the truth in this situation, because if we do try to clear the sky out, and I think we will tonight, that will allow us to clear out, and with a fairly light wind overall. Winds will be key on this, but we're going to have some warm air advection move in tonight, and that could lead to problems with fog tomorrow morning. The models are struggling with the fog potential on that, and we'll cover that here in a second. Here's a wider view showing how, again, we're starting to see some dry air work its way in slowly but surely across the area. But there is a warm front right in through, well, drew too far to the west, but it's right in through areas where the warm front is, and it is heading north and east, and that will arrive here for tomorrow. All right, so let's get right into the details and discussion. First off, here's the RPM model showing how things try to clear. But just as we try to clear around 1 or 2 a.m., watch what happens when we get the warm air advection fog, especially for those that have snow on the ground. This is more important for you guys because you'll start to see it develop and drift. And I think the higher potential looks to be in this area here of eastern Kentucky. Can't rule it out in Louisville. And yes, there is a chance it could be freezing fog, considering the drop that could happen below freezing. That could add a light little glaze in some areas. So we will watch this, and hopefully we'll get a better handle on this toward the newscast. And then otherwise, we'll clear things out once the fog lifts, and we'll get a chance to get up there closer to 50 for Thursday afternoon. GFS is showing, it's hard to read this sounding, but it is showing fog being likely for the Louisville area, although there's not much of an inversion showing up here on the sounding itself. So it's certainly more of a warm air advection scenario more than an inversion, it looks like. But you definitely can see how the winds are very light at the surface, and that's why it's trying to pick up on an idea of fog around the area. Again, it's just a chance. We'll watch that. What is even more interesting is that the GFS and even the NAM to some extent tomorrow do show an inversion that gets stuck over us even through tomorrow afternoon. So you just saw the RPM clears this out. Well, the other models are trying to say that we won't clear out until after 3 or 4 tomorrow afternoon if we get fog. We've seen that happen many, many times. I'm not ruling that out, and that will affect the temperature. If that is the case, we will not hit 50 tomorrow. We will only be in the 40s. So there's a chance we may have another cool, cloudy day to contend with tomorrow. But again, I will analyze some more short-term stuff before we get into closer to news time, and we'll make a final decision then. But just letting you know some of the data we are looking at here behind the scenes is rolling in here today. Then we get into Friday, especially Friday morning. That is when the warm front really surges in here. Look at these winds. I mean, it's just above the surface. 60 to 70 knots, which will put us at hurricane force winds just above the tree line, basically, for Friday morning. So very strong winds blowing in here. This very well will push us, I think, to advisory level, wind advisory level, for a good chunk of wave country on Friday, especially in the morning to about midday. So something we will be monitoring carefully. Here is the RPM model showing the wind direction and the wind speed, by the way. Throughout the day on Thursday, no problems. Look what happens by Friday at noon. Potential wind gust of 40 to 45 miles per hour out of the southwest in wave country. And that, again, would put us in wind advisory criteria. So I think that is likely to happen, but we'll see how that plays out. We got another full 24 hours of data to go through. And then we got a weak boundary that does drift in here. It doesn't change the wind direction. It's more of a moisture boundary. Some of the models are trying to squeeze out some raindrops and drizzle out of this Friday night. Wouldn't roll it out. So if you're going to wash your car on Friday, keep in mind, if you leave it outside, you may get a few raindrops on it Friday night, and that could ruin a clean car in a heartbeat. We know how that works. Not going to rule it out, but I think a lot of that will be very, very isolated the way it's looking. All right, we'll come back to this in a second. Now we get into Sunday, and this is where things start to evolve. Here is the Canadian for Sunday. Saturday, by the way, it still looks to be a warm day, and if we get enough sunshine, I think we're going to get up there close to 70. But Sunday is when we have our next wave that is going to roll in. Now, the way this is going to work, let me change my wand here so you can see the colors a little better. As we get into Sunday, this little wave is going to track either along or just south of I-70, the way the trend has been on the midday model runs. Attached to this low is going to be a front, a boundary. So you have the wind directions there are from the northwest. So there is a front with this Sunday afternoon and night. The issue with this, first off, we've got to gather a good handle on this wave. Is it going to be I-70 or south? Second question we need to answer is, how far south does this front that is dragging behind it stop? Does it get stuck over Tennessee, or does it get stuck over the southeast? Because that will play a role into next week. More on that in a second. Here is the GFS. It is closer with the wave to I-64 than I-70, dragging the front even further to the south. In fact, with the low being so close to it, it's a little bit of warm air ahead of it, it is hinting, I know it's hard to see this, but the LI here is showing up as 0, which indicates there could be some thunder in some cases on Sunday, excuse me. Severe weather, no. Thunder, possibility, more showers than anything Sunday into Sunday night. Here is the Euro, it just came in. It's more with the Canadian idea of a more I-70 track with the front dragging itself again, mainly through the Tennessee Valley is where it drags that front down. So, again, the key on where that front drags down Sunday night into Monday is going to be the key setup for next week. So let's go back now to the Canadian. The Canadian develops the front into this area, or stalls the front across the Arklatex into the Tennessee Valley. This automatically creates a cyclogenesis here. We get a low that's going to develop because we've got cold air dropping in from the north. As the low develops, it then tracks to the northeast, and I got to switch model types here because of the range here. So this is the weather bell look of what happens after that. It takes the low, and it's a split low. You get a surface low that's going to develop up the Carolina coast, and you get an upper level low that develops across northern areas of Alabama. Stop me if you've seen this before. It tracks into eastern Kentucky. And yes, we would be on the colder side of things, which would make things interesting. Now, I will say the boundary layer temperatures in this setup even are marginal. You snow lovers hate when I say that, but they are marginal. Can't snow still happen? Yes. But because we're coming out of a warm-up instead of out of Arctic air like the last one, my confidence level in this being all snow is a lot lower than the previous one was. It would usually tend to lean more toward a rain event. But we'll see how it plays out. That's a Canadian. Here is the GFS. As I mentioned before, the GFS took that Sunday low along I-64 on Sunday. So because of that, it drags the front way to the south into the Gulf of Mexico. So therefore, it develops a more southern storm that tracks up the east coast. It only grazes East Kentucky. And because of elevation, they likely would get quite the thumping of snow. Pretty much would skip us entirely based on the GFS idea. Here is the Euro. Like the Canadian, stalls out the system pretty much just south of us into Tennessee. The low pressure, not as deep, develops over Alabama and Georgia, and then heads up the East Coast, not a very strong low. It grazes us, but again, because it's not a strong low, overall, a precip type would be kind of an issue here, rain and or snow around the area. Now, what's this all telling me? Well, a couple things here. First off, I think the idea of a front stalling here Sunday night into Monday of next week is very high. I'm pretty high on the confidence level on that. The problem then becomes, where will the low develop and how will it evolve? Because a low in the Gulf of Mexico is more than likely going to be an East Coast event. It would also have a better chance of dragging a lot of cold air because it's a stronger low. It's going to feed off the waters of the Gulf and the Gulf Stream and the eastern seaboard here. But if a low pressure develops in the Dixie states and tracks through the Appalachians, it will have a more difficult time becoming a strong low pressure. Therefore, it's going to have marginal cold air to pull into it, and that would only lead to precip type issues, especially along and east of 65. I will say the GFS, as we all know, has a tendency to be really strong with the northern stream feature, so it's not surprising that it's diving it all the way down to the Gulf. So it's hard to pay attention to the GFS. I think the Euro idea of a weaker low, but more impactful low, is likely for next Tuesday and Wednesday. What is even more interesting is the indices that just came out, now showing for the first time this season, if they hold, going negative during this period, which would indicate an East Coast scenario for a storm. And the AO is going negative, and the PNA is certainly going positive. So all the indices line up for the idea of an East Coast storm next week. How it evolves is still up in the air. Do not read the models like I showed you here verbatim. Look at the pattern. Cold air is dropping down. You've got a stalled front to the south of us. A low will develop along the front. It is going to go up the coast. Those are the facts of the way the weather pattern is looking. So that's what we got to go with for right now. The details, as far as is it going to be rain or snow, how much of Kentucky is going to be affected, I can't answer that. Nobody can. But it is warranted an item on the monitoring list, and that's where it'll stay for now.